Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. With us on the program today, we got to talk to Aarika Rhodes. She is a congressional candidate in California, district to be named later, because she's running for Congress in 2022. So we'll figure that out come after the redistricting. But we had a lovely conversation today about the key priorities of her campaign, particularly education, how she would be trying to address the ongoing economic and health crises in our country, what she is like as a leader and how she tries to rally people to her side. And finally, what does it take to be a great canvasser? Aarika is truly a phenomenal canvasser. We've gotten to see that so much during the spring and winter when she was canvassing for Andrew Yang. So she got to share that valuable insight with us all so that we can figure out how we can be better advocates to support her campaign and all the other campaigns that are currently ongoing in 2020. It was a wonderful conversation. I so much enjoyed it. I know you will too. So with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, we're here with Aarika Rhodes. Aarika is a congressional candidate in the 2022 cycle in California. Aarika, welcome so much to the Hill of Roses.
Thank you, John, for having me. I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Well, I'm very excited to be able to have you on. I love the fact that, we've gotten to talk to so many 2020 candidates. It's great that we already have the people who are being proactive and trying to set themselves up for the future run. Aarika, you're a school teacher. I'd love to ask, you're obviously already helping people. You're already teaching people. What made you feel like you had to go and run for office to have that type of an influence instead of teaching?
Thank you for that question. So I love being a teacher, and I think it was really hard to make the decision that, I could potentially be leaving the classroom because, if you're a teacher, you understand like those in-class moments are epic and kids are obviously really fun and sometimes more fun than adults. but I think with COVID, it really exposed some of the injustices in our education system. And when Andrew Yang, that's who I was supporting in the primary, I loved his education policies. I loved his approach to fixing our education system. And I think that there needs to be this great emphasis on teaching financial literacy in schools, making sure kids have access to technology, making sure that, kids are acquiring life skills. I feel like we're not teaching, home economics anymore, wood shop, things that are going to give them a layup to not only have lucrative careers, but to be well-rounded citizens. Vocational schooling is obviously something that I'm advocating for and I think is really important. And what I'm seeing with young people, that they're getting so burnt out with tests. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like standardized testing. Yeah. And teachers are getting burned.
I have one myself upcoming. So yeah, it doesn't stop even after high school and college. Yeah.
And I think teachers are getting tired with teaching to a test. And so that's one thing that I'm really, really pushing for. And I think it could be done. It needs to be done, obviously, at the local level. But I think there's a lot of influence that can be had at the federal level, especially with influence of budgets and making sure teachers can have, financial resources to buy the things that they need. And so my goal is to actually sit on be in on the education committee. That's my end goal. That's where I really want to end up in Congress. So that's one thing. And then the other part is the injustice in terms of kids that come from low income areas, kids of color. There's truly a discrepancy and an injustice with our education system. And so that is something I feel very passionate about and it's worth fighting for. And that's partly why I decided to run for Congress, partly why.
So I want to ask Aarika, in your opinion, how do you feel the actual addressing of going back to school has been during this coronavirus era?
So I think that some schools have done better than other schools. Some districts have played it way differently. But ultimately, I feel that we should have I feel like the Trump administration did a a lousy job setting teachers up for success. And Betsy DeVos did not set teachers up for success. And I think the long-term impact is going to be great. I think with mental health, the frustration teachers are having. I'm personally concerned with teachers wanting to leave the profession as a result of having, to deal with all of the chaos. Like teachers I hear all the time are doing double and triple the work. It is really, really, really hard to teach on Zoom. I feel like for me, we have to be safe, like safety's first. But something that does not get talked about, John, that needs to get talked about is the abuse rates. So when COVID happened, what happened was we had a decline in child abuse reports. And with the financial and the emotional strain that has happened with unemployment, my biggest concern is that we have a higher increase of child abuse. And because teachers are mandated reporters, administrators are mandated reporters, we're not catching those cases. So I'm very, very concerned about that. And then lastly, child hunger is something else that I'm really, really concerned about, because we know that the economic impact that COVID has had, parents are really struggling to get by and keep food on the table. And so I do worry about that. So in those regards, I want us desperately to deal with and address COVID so we can get kids back in school. That's really important to me.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly hear you there. There's a lot of resources that come from education that's more than just, knowledge. It's a lot of these resources to make sure people are having proper home lives in addition to what they're learning in school. With that being said, a lot of education in general is managed on a more local and state level. What are you hoping for the federal government to do to be able to assist these states in their reopening processes? Obviously, there are key resources these kids are missing from not being in school. What are you looking for the federal level to do to help kids get back into school safely?
I really want our government to address and solve COVID. I think once we can get the coronavirus under control, where we can make sure everyone, like businesses and the schools, have the PPE and everything that they need to be safe, and we can just encourage to wear a mask and just reduce it. I think that's the first step. I put this on Trump. I need Trump's administration to address this problem as a serious matter, because it is. And once we can address the coronavirus, then we'll be able to open our schools up. But we can't do anything until they actually deal with this problem.
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of the biggest things. But then let's say we do that, right? Then it's making sure that we have the teachers and schools have the funding that they need to make sure that schools are safe and that we're able to have masks provided, plexiglass, hand sanitizer, all the things that we need in a school to make sure that the teachers are safe, that kids are safe, when the parents come on campus, they're safe, and implement protocols. I think having national protocols so everybody's on the same page would be very, very helpful. I think that's part of the problem. I get that every state has different case sizes and stuff, but I do think having kind of a standard of what the bare minimum should at least be is very helpful. A lot of people are getting mixed messages, and we need to be all on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's a very comprehensive approach. Obviously, we want to stop the reason why we have to get kids back to school safe in the first place, which is COVID. And then it comes down to funding and basic protocols to be able to make sure that, while some states want to open earlier, they're at least doing it in a safer manner. I'd love to just pry a little bit more. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then another thing I think we have to invest in is after-school programs and tutoring programs for kids. So with COVID, not every kid was able to have access to resources or internet. So that means that they are not accessing the content. And there's going to be a huge, huge increase in our achievement gap. It's going to be completely widened. So I do want to see the federal government step in and create and implement really robust, rich after-school programs and tutoring programs and all those additional resources to make sure that we can start to close the achievement gap again, because that's really, really important.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that part. I'd love to ask you, in addressing the overall coronavirus, we're obviously in the middle of some conversations around getting another stimulus bill out or just any legislation to try and address the problem. I'd love to hear, in your opinion, and I think this will be the best thing to end the first part of our conversation on. How do you feel about the ongoing stimulus talks? Do you believe that the current $1.8 trillion deal that Trump is proposing has merit? How do you feel in general that things should be playing out to try and help with the coronavirus?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I would really like to see our Congress put their political differences aside, get into a room together, have an adult conversation, find common ground, and the things that they can absolutely agree on, turn that into a bill, pass it. Then the stuff that you cannot agree on, then work towards that stuff. People need relief. We have people that are barely getting by. People who are already paycheck to paycheck. It is like meal to meal at this point. I literally went to 2 small businesses yesterday, and both were just like, oh my God, thank you so much. We're like hanging by a thread. This like overwhelming sense of gratitude just for buying a soup. Like I went to a Chinese restaurant and I just got wonton soup. And it was just like, she was like your business means everything, anything I can get for you, just desperately needing relief. And so that's one thing, is like I really feel we need to pass something. And I'm very saddened that we can't find common ground, especially when so much is at stake. Unemployment is through the roof. We're going to have our poverty levels are going to be through the roof. We have more people unhoused now than ever. You know, I actually am, in my district alone, we have a really, really bad homeless population. Yesterday I was out and I can totally see it's growing. I see more and more people sleeping in their cars. There was I don't know, did you see this video where people were chaining themselves to the courthouse to prevent an eviction hearing?
I might have. The problem is there's a lot of those, frankly. Yeah.
Because people are so desperate, and that desperation is just an indication that we need a stimulus. We need to pass something. Now, I can see both sides, right? Like I can absolutely see both sides, but I do think there's more room to agree than to disagree. I really think that there's the common ground. Honestly, I would love, I don't know, how would you, do you feel, I would love for you to answer this as well, but wouldn't you like more people in Congress to speak out about this?
Oh, for certain. Right now, it's been roughly, 4 Democrats at the moment who have come forward. As of the time this gets published, it might be more. But yeah, 100%, I'd love more people to come forward and say, yeah, we got to get some stimulus done right now.
And like the reoccurring, I was advocating for the reoccurring payments months ago.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you really just talk to people and you just look at the data, the economy, obviously this increase in homelessness and people losing their homes was going to happen. It was inevitable, right? And you know who was deeply impacted? Women. We have more women forced to leave the workforce to stay home and care for their children or their child during this pandemic. So to go back to the distance learning stuff, it's like, that's one of the reasons why I really want us to rectify and bring coronavirus to a conclusion, because we have so many women that cannot even work because they have to stay at home with their children, you know, and we've come so far, and it's just like for whatever reason, the burden just always falls back on women. And so that's something that they need the stimulus too. Like, so, because childcare has been very expensive. Not everyone can afford childcare and work. I heard someone say, that's just basically giving my whole paycheck away anyway. Right. So if we had the stimulus and we had the reoccurring payment, now parents could have potentially afford childcare and still been able to work, and they wouldn't be struggling to stay afloat. They would be able to just manage, and the kids would have the assistance that they needed.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point, that there is a lot more impact than just not having resources, not having people be able to go into school, but you have to make sacrifices because of those trade-offs. If your kid is at home, you can't just leave them there all by themselves. You need some parental supervision. Yes, some people are fortunate out there where they've been able to work from home and try and juggle, but that's not every person's circumstance. And I think to jump on top of that, it's more than just taking care of the kids. The coronavirus has been particularly susceptible for the elderly population.
Yep.
And these elderly homes have largely had to be vacated because they're such sensitive hotspots for this disease that more people are having to take on domestic work, often more times women, to be able to support the elderly in our population. So I think you're absolutely right. Some stimulus definitely needs to get done to be able to support these groups.
What do you think of the bill?
I think right now the 1.8 trillion, there are some flaws in it. I don't like the liability protection, but I think if you can just say, this is largely good enough that we can start negotiation based on this, I think that's right. Most of the bill is good. Like I would say 90% of the bill's content is good. Let's agree to there, and then let's start chopping out some of the ugly bits out of it if we can. I think that's really the best approach. You're absolutely right that this reoccurring stimulus bill has been out there for months. We've had a bill in the Senate from our VP Kamala Harris, and we've had bills in the House from Tim Ryan and Ro Khanna. Let's pass a clean stimulus bill that's just getting money directly into people's hands without feeding all these different special interest groups or, adding additional laws to the contents. Because it's not just Democrats or Republicans that are doing this, because the Republicans have added that liability language. Democrats did the same thing, trying to combine some of the criminal justice stuff into the economic stimulus bill. I support the criminal justice stuff, but let's do that in a separate bill. Let's keep this as simple as can be, getting help directly to people.
Do you feel like the bill has become political?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's become political on all sides here. There are some people who see it as political in the sense of if Trump gets a stimulus bill, well, he's going to look good for that. He's going to help people. The markets are going to bounce from that, and that could help his political reelection potentially. On the other hand, you have Republicans who might see Trump as an inevitable loss, and so they want to deny this stimulus bill, as they've already reportedly admitted, because they want to pivot to austerity come 2021 when Joe Biden takes office, and they want to lay this as the groundwork for justifying their position. And they also just want to focus more on the judges. So yeah, 100% this is political, and I'm glad that the few voices who have spoken out have.
And so now that you acknowledge that this is political, who's paying for the politics in this?
Oh boy, it largely depends on what the final outcome is, because I see what's going to happen now is Trump should put pressure on Congress more so. If the Democrats finally come around and say, hey, we already have this bill, or hey, we'll agree to these terms, I think that's going to force him to then pressure McConnell. And if McConnell says no, that's going to make Trump eat it. If McConnell is the one who says yes, then I think, frankly, the Democrats are likely going to eat it. It's like, I think we have to just be willing to take a short-term political loss to literally save lives. And if it makes Democrats look a little bad because the president got a stimulus deal, I'm okay with that because we're literally saving lives.
And that's where I was going with this. It shouldn't be political in the sense that we're in a pandemic and people are hurting. And I just want people to come before politics. I want people to be the priority. And that's where I get super frustrated, is that I see some horrific things, because I'm always out and about, working on my campaign and talking to people and just invested in my community. And it just kind of implies that politics is more important than people. And it's not. It's to me, it's the opposite. Because I look at it like this. If I were in Congress right now, the single mom that's struggling is not worth my beef with Trump. The kids that are not in school are not worth my beef with Nancy Pelosi. When you have people that are experiencing homelessness using litter boxes, like kitty litter to use the restroom, because when everything was closed down, they couldn't even get into a restroom. That's inhumane. We are treating people like animals, less than animals. And that's where my frustration comes in. When you see people just rock bottom, sleeping on concrete. That is not the political implication. That's not worth it for me.
Yeah, no,
I put my pride aside to negotiate. And that's what I really want to see in Congress.
I wholeheartedly hear you, Erica. I think this is a great place for us to take a quick break and come back, because I think in the second part of our conversation, I really want to talk strategy. How do we start taking these ideas and clear crises that we're facing and start actually getting something done, despite these actors who don't see it the same way we do, that people matter more than politics. So with that being said, everyone, we'll be right back, and we'll be talking to Erica a lot more about, if she gets elected, how do we start getting these ideas across the finish line? Okay, we are back with Aarika Rhodes. She is a congressional candidate in California in 2022. We just wrapped up the first part of our conversation where we talked about the key pillar of her agenda, which is fixing our educational system, as well as how we address the politics of our ongoing crisis. In this second part of our conversation, we're going to dive into a little bit more of who Aarika is as a leader. We obviously were talking a little bit about how we handle the ongoing coronavirus crisis. And I'd love to just talk to you about, how do we try to address, when you're running for a House position, when we don't own the Senate? What do you think of that relationship that a House member is supposed to have with the Senate? Because we've had hundreds of bills that have been passed by the House that have just simply not gotten a vote in the Senate. What would your approach be to try and get some of those bills, at least get a vote in the Senate?
So I'm glad that we're addressing leadership. I think something that I've learned through this whole process of being actively involved in the primary and now running my own congressional race is listening and being able to talk to people that might have different viewpoints. And a conversation, when you're genuinely trying to listen, not to respond, but listen to understand, goes a long, long way with people. And so I think that to me is a leader. I think sometimes being a leader is really actively listening to people. And when you're listening and you're not judging, you're not bashing, you're not name calling, I think people are going to be more inspired and compelled to work with you. I think that it's unfortunate that it has to be a blue Senate, a blue Congress to get something done. I would really like to see our Congress get to a point where that even if we have a blue House and a red Senate, we're able to get things done. Because again, like we were just talking about, people are hurting, people are suffering. There's so much we need to do to get done. And so I think that's what makes me a unique leader, is like I'm willing to go talk to people. I don't have an ego. I'm not prideful. I'm not in it for any other reason but to advocate for policies I believe that will really genuinely help kids and help people. And that's what I'm all about. So I say that to say we need to get to a place where it can be bipartisan. I also want to say, I'll just use Lindsey Graham's words. Elections have consequences. And so we want to get things done. If we're unable to get to a mature place where we can work in a bipartisan way, then vote. We need people to go out and actually vote so we can pass these things that we want in order to see a difference in our community. And so in Congress, I'm very, very much about working across the aisle and trying to build meaningful relationships from all sides. I don't take issue with Republicans, to be honest. And I don't take issue. It's not, everything can't be about political party, and I feel like there is more we have in common than we differ. I really believe that. And I love how Jamie Harrison, to say it with the Lindsey Graham, is that we may not have the same approach to get there, but we still have the same end goal in many cases. And so that's where that common ground has to take place. And so voting for candidates that are willing to work across the aisle, candidates that have the capacity to put their differences aside for the betterment of people is leadership. And voters are leaders because you're saying that this is what I want to see, and that's being a leader. Because at the end of the day, a representative represents their constituents, and so a leader also needs to listen to that, to them.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's this overall, we have to have a little bit more humanity, a little bit more independence, a willingness to listen. But, I also love to pry. What are some of those, bipartisan ideas, that you'd be looking to push forward and hopefully get passed in your term in office, hopefully? Obviously talked about education, but what are some of those other, bipartisan ideas that you're looking to push for in your campaign?
So education is obviously, there's so much room for bipartisanship, but outside of that, I think there is an opportunity for a universal basic income. I think there's an opportunity for democracy dollars and ranked choice voting. I think that appeals to both sides of the aisle. I also think there's an opportunity, and you might not agree, but I do think there's an opportunity for for criminal justice reform. I do think that there's.
Oh, no, I don't disagree. We've gotten some through so far in the First Step Act.
Yeah, I think because of just the civic unrest right now in our country, it just seems like unattainable. But I do believe that there is room for that, and I would say those are the big ones that outside of education. There's many in education, but I think outside of education, those are the main ones that can definitely get bipartisan support. Ones I would like to see is the environment. I really wish that we can come to a consensus on the environment, that science is real, climate change is real, and that we need to address climate change in a very, very robust way. And I would love to see us advocate for infrastructure in our country.
Yeah, I think that last point is something great to bring up. You mentioned how you'd like it to become a more bipartisan issue. How do you try to talk about that issue with people that aren't all the way there yet with what you want to do on climate change? How do you try and, frame these topics that might be controversial when you don't think they should be to those that have a differing opinion?
Yeah, it's funny because people will say like, yeah, I see differences, especially when I was in Iowa and New Hampshire, not really in California. Most people in California.
Yeah, it's a little bit more agreed to out there. Yeah.
Most people in California do believe in science and that climate change is real, especially with the fires that we have every year now. But I will just refer to when I was in Iowa, New Hampshire, I feel that they acknowledge it, but they don't feel it's urgent. And so what I try to do is relate it to my personal experiences. So not just the fires that happen every year now in California, but when I went to Belize and I went scuba diving in the blue hole, seeing all the coral reef dead and there was no ocean life there was heart-wrenching. It was absolutely heart-wrenching. And I can literally go through my phone and swipe and show the photos. I think people don't really understand the impact because they're not in the ocean. They're not 30 feet underwater seeing that there's no more ocean life and that the coral is bleaching, and that the temperatures are rising. If not everyone actively goes and watches like these documentaries and stuff, but in Greenland, look at all the ice that's being melted. It's horrible. So I try to approach it with real world examples that from my personal experience.
Yeah, I think you're right that it does bring an urgency when you can see it in real life. It doesn't feel like this invisible threat that a lot of people kind of treat it like it is. There is real tangible impacts throughout the world that people can viscerally see. With that being said, I think this goes to, frankly, a great final question, which is I think a lot of people came to know you through that primary process where you were a frequent canvasser for Andrew Yang during the primary. And I'd love to ask you, you were one of the clearly most effective people. I don't know if you ever showed the failures, who knows, but you seem to be one of the most effective canvassers that I've ever seen personally. And I'd love to ask if you had any advice for people who are looking to canvass, what makes a more successful interaction from more conflicting interaction?
I think I posted from time to time people that were like, no, and not people that are not interested, are not always willing to make a video or take a photo with you. Yeah. But I did have people that were like, okay, no, I'm not going to support Andrew Yang. But I think why I had more support and I was able to convince a lot of people was because going back to what I was saying, I listen to people. Mm-hmm. I genuinely care what someone says. Like, I don't ask a question and not care about the answer. I genuinely give a damn about their answer and how they feel. And I was very interested in UBI. I was an advocate for it, but it wasn't I was mostly curious, like, how could this really benefit someone's life? And I think that innately motivated me to keep talking to a lot of people. And the common thread was people are sick of being broke. People are sick of living paycheck to paycheck. It is so stressful to be like, I don't get emotional, but to hear multiple people say, I only have $2 in my bank account. I'm negative X amount in my bank account. I don't know like how I'm going to afford this, that, and the other. You know, like it broke my heart. And I think hearing the struggles of other people made me want to fight for them. And I really believe, you know, Andrew, you've met him. I've met him many times. He really cares about people. And I believe that he would have been the person in office that was going to put people first, that he was going to do every single thing he humanly possible to make everyone's life better. And I say all that to say, listening, being genuine, and knowing why you're talking to people. I think sometimes people get into politics and they've been in there for so long that they forget why they ran in the first place. You know, I've already committed that I would probably only do 10 years. That's 5 terms, because I do believe that there's great value in having someone else, you know, sit in that seat and bring new, fresh, innovative ideas. I think when you've been in a position for so long, you could be disconnected from the struggle of everyday people. And John, I think this is important. Sorry, I'm going on a little tangent, but I do think this is important. We spend a lot of time talking about people living at or below the poverty line. But wealthy people, which I know a lot of wealthy people, they are tired too. You know, I think wealthy people are tired of the civic unrest. I think wealthy people are very open to making sure other people are able to live in dignity and with respect. And that's why you have so many people donating to these different congressional races, because they want change too. So I think they're in this fight as well. And I just want us to not neglect people of privilege, because I don't like demonizing wealthy people. I think that they're trying to figure out how they can help as well. I know that's not what you just said, but I do think
No, I think that is important though, because I do think when you've looked at a lot of the historical progressive movement, especially back to like the 1910s, when we actually got women's right to vote, a lot of this was upper middle class people being able to actually help because they had the resources, they had the time to try and inform themselves. And you know what? Even today, when you look at voting rates, it is going to be more often people of means are going to show up to vote more often. So I think it's electorally smart, in addition to just being a humane philosophy, that we shouldn't be demonizing people. I think it's very important.
And the thing, when I was campaigning for Andrew and I was talking to people that are privileged, I asked, like, well, what would you do with your universal basic income? And I'd say 9 out of 10 times it was super selfless and rooted in humanity.
I've heard that as well. A lot of people would just become more donors. And I think that's frankly needed. You know, it's going to supercharge people because they get money directly, but then there's going to be more social services that are well funded.
Can I tell you one more thing? Can I tell you one more thing too about something I learned campaigning and asking people about universal basic income? There's more people than we realize willing to adopt. That one of the biggest reasons why people don't adopt is because of the finances and how expensive it is to have a child. And I was really surprised to hear how many people would actually they would use their UBI to foster or adopt a child.
I think that's a wonderful point because, you know, yes, right now we give tax credits to people who do adoptions, but it's not like there's a one-time cost. Yes, there's an upfront cost to be able to actually adopt someone, but then you have all the childcare costs, and that's the biggest barrier to why people aren't adopting. So I think that's a great point. There's a lot of hidden benefits that'll come with it that even conservatives should be able to get onto, because if they don't want people to have an abortion, the alternative is putting up the kid for foster care, and we should help people get adopted. There's over 120,000 right now that are up for adoption. So I think that's a great final point. But Aarika, you know, for the people who have been listening so far, you know, obviously you're a master canvasser. How can they be able to canvas for you and help your campaign if they enjoyed hearing what you had to say today?
So thank you again for having me. I'm honored to be on your channel. I think right now, right in these next couple of weeks, I think it's important to focus on the 2020 election and making sure Biden gets elected and that these these other amazing candidates that are running get elected, even though I started mine. But after, literally the day after, small dollar donations, being a reoccurring donor would be very useful to our campaign. And that means that like $5 or $10 every month would be just essential, because it takes a lot of money to run a congressional campaign. Following my campaign on all social media platforms, visiting our website, and just staying up to date with all the events and things that we have going, and just being supportive. Positive energy, moral support goes a really long way. And so that is how you can support my campaign. And then when we get later down the road, phone banking, text banking, door knocking, the use.
Okay, great. Yeah, and you know what? We do hope everyone will get started in that effort. I don't think there can be a point in which we're too early in starting to help these candidates for 2022. But like Aarika, I'm going to also echo, let's focus in this less than 3 weeks now on getting the 2020 slate that we want, and then we'll hit the ground running. But Aarika, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure, and I hope we can talk again, hopefully after the November election.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, we hope you have a great rest of your day. And everyone out there, if you want to be able to support Aarika, as we have scrolling across the bottom of our page, you can find more by going to aarikaforcongress.com. Aarika, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of The Hill of Roses. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please let us know by subscribing to our channel, liking today's video, and sharing the video with your friends. Also, if you want to be notified, please make sure you hit the bell when you subscribe. Finally, if you want to find more of our network's content, please go to thehillofroses.com. With that being said, we love y'all for helping the movement grow, and we hope you're staying rosy out there.